Something unusual has been happening at the clerk's office for the Federal District Court in the Eastern District of Virginia. Bipartisan groups of former federal judges, former U.S. attorneys, current and former members of Congress, and former senior officials of the Department of Justice have all separately asked the court for permission to file briefs in the James Comey case. They aren't asking to defend Comey personally. They're asking for the opportunity to defend the rule of law and the Department of Justice. These groups see something dangerous unfolding, a department that for generations prided itself on integrity, independence, and a commitment to equal protection under the law appears to have lost its compass. And the architect of that loss is its own leader, Attorney General Pam Bondi. The prosecution of James Comey was announced with fanfare. The president posted on Truth Social in capital letters, "Justice in America," stating that Comey was one of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to. The Department of Justice itself issued press releases quoting Attorney General Bondi as stating, "No one is above the law." But inside the Department of Justice before the indictment was returned, the case looked very different. Career prosecutors reportedly refused to bring the case because they believed there was insufficient evidence that Comey had committed a crime. The interim U.S. attorney, a Republican appointee, resigned rather than pursue this and another politically charged indictment. On September 20th, President Trump posted his now famous Truth Social post demanding the prosecution of Comey and others now, and essentially instructing Bondi to appoint Lindsay Halligan as interim U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. 2 days later, Bondi appointed Halligan. The Attorney General appointed Halligan using the same potentially problematic appointment procedure that was followed for the appointment of the interim U.S. attorney in New Jersey, a procedure a federal judge already had found was unlawful. And by the way, before he was on the Supreme Court, Justice Samuel Alito wrote a memo for the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel that also concluded that the same appointment procedure Bondi followed was not a lawful procedure. Ask yourself this: what kind of attorney general takes the risk of appointing an interim U.S. attorney in one of the most high-profile DOJ prosecutions ever, using an appointment procedure that a federal judge and a current Supreme Court justice have already found to be unlawful? Lindsay Halligan has no criminal trial experience. 3 days after her appointment as interim U.S. attorney, she sought and obtained one of the most politically explosive indictments in modern American history. So here's another question for you. What do you think of the judgment of an attorney general who sends an untested lawyer who's never handled a criminal case to seek her first indictment in one of the most controversial, high-profile courtroom battles in U.S. history?
Lastly, and most importantly, if confirmed, I will fight every day to restore confidence and integrity to the Department of Justice and each of its components. The partisanship, the weaponization will be gone. America will have one tier of justice for all.
At her confirmation hearing, Pam Bondi promised to end the so-called weaponization of the Department of Justice. And traditionally, the Attorney General serves as the President's conscience in matters of law when the President might want to cross a line that shouldn't be crossed. The Attorney General is the voice that says, "Wait, let's think this through," when the President demands, "now." Pam Bondi did the opposite. She gave the President what he wanted, a controversial indictment of one of his critics, without giving him what he needed most, honest legal advice about the weakness of the case and the damage the case could cause to the Department of Justice and to the President himself. By failing to do her job, she recast the Department's mission from serving justice to serving politics, power, and vindictiveness. As of today, federal judges in 3 separate districts have ruled that the appointment procedure used by Attorney General Bondi to appoint interim U.S. attorneys in districts in California, Nevada, and New Jersey was unlawful. Bondi followed the same process to appoint Halligan, and Comey's lawyers are now challenging that appointment in his case. The defense lawyers in the Comey case have also filed strong motions to dismiss the indictment based on vindictive prosecution, selective prosecution, and the literal truth of Comey's alleged false statements. The success of any one of these motions will lead to dismissal of the indictment. The writing is on the wall. The Comey prosecution is full of holes, and it's in trouble. In a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee in October, Attorney General Bondi admitted that President Trump's Truth Social posting encouraging the prosecution of Comey and others was directed to her.
Last month, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia was forced out. President Trump then posted the message behind me asking about prosecuting James Comey. You then appointed a new U.S. attorney who within days secured an indictment against James Comey. That social media post behind me saying, "What about Comey?" was directed to Pam. Are you the Pam that the president was referring to?
I'm sure I was.
She refused to answer any other questions about how the prosecution came about.
In fact, 5 days before the indictment of James Comey, he put this post up as instructions to you. He didn't mince words. He was very open and public that you should indict James Comey and others because they are guilty as hell. No more delay now. 5 days before you indicted, or grand jury at your instructions indicted James Comey. I'd like to know from you what conversations you've had with President Trump about the indictment of James Comey.
Senator, I am not going to discuss any conversations I have or have not had with the President of the United
Did you
States.
see that?
But Attorney General Bondi doesn't have to answer questions because the way the prosecution has played out makes clear that the Comey prosecution is a vindictive prosecution prompted by the President. The President's social media post calling for the prosecution appears to be the first time in U.S. history that a sitting president made a public request for the Department of Justice to prosecute his critics and political adversaries. And people have noticed. In recent days, multiple groups have sought permission to file amicus briefs in the Comey case. These are so-called friends of the court who rarely appear in criminal cases. Among the groups, former senior officials of the Department of Justice, former federal judges and former U.S. attorneys, university professors and scholars, a bipartisan group of current and former members of Congress. They aren't asking to enter the case to defend Comey. They're asking to enter the case to defend the rule of law. Their message is unmistakable. This prosecution never should have been brought. Each amicus filing reminds us that the department's credibility depends not on who it prosecutes, but why. And when prosecutions appear retaliatory or legally unsound, the cost is paid not just by the people being prosecuted, but by the Department of Justice itself. Every administration makes mistakes, but never has an administration lost so much of DOJ's credibility so quickly. Bondi's decisions have divided her own department, alienated career professionals, and prompted the resignation of some of the most experienced and ethical lawyers in the department. Her leadership has invited public doubt about DOJ's independence. If the Comey indictments collapse, as many observers predict, it will not simply be a courtroom defeat. It will be a lasting scar on the department's reputation and on the president. Lost amid this mess is Lindsay Halligan herself, the lawyer thrust into the center of all of it. By all accounts, she's intelligent, ambitious, and loyal. But loyalty is no substitute for judgment, and experience can't be invented overnight. She was placed in an impossible position, prosecuting a weak case that her experienced predecessors refused to bring. She faces some of the best defense lawyers in the nation, under scrutiny the department has rarely faced. In many ways, she's become a symbol of what happens when political loyalty replaces professional prudence. She's an innocent being sent to slaughter in a legal battle she never should have been asked to fight. By choosing to pursue this vindictive and legally fragile prosecution of James Comey, Attorney General Bondi has done more than embarrass her department. She's diverted public attention from the remarkable work being carried out every day by the department's career prosecutors and law enforcement officers. These are the people I worked with for more than 30 years. These are men and women who quietly uphold the rule of law without fanfare or politics, who investigate and prosecute violent gangs, dismantle child exploitation networks, protect national security, and pursue corruption cases wherever the evidence leads. Their dedication and professionalism are the backbone of the Department of Justice. Yet instead of celebrating that work, Bondi's focused the public conversation on a single, reckless indictment, one that undermines the credibility of the very institution those professionals spend their lives defending. The Justice Department's authority rests on public trust, the belief that its decisions are guided by evidence, not politics. When that belief erodes, even legitimate prosecutions begin to look suspect. If this prosecution fails, and after more than 30 years as a federal prosecutor, I can offer you my opinion that it almost certainly will, the biggest victim of the legal abuse won't be James Comey. It will be the Department of Justice itself. Its credibility, its independence, the trust it took a century to build can all be lost in a moment because of Pam Bondi's reckless blunder. If you found this commentary helpful, please subscribe. And remember, where law rules, justice follows.